Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Quigley on Divorce, a behind-the-scenes look. Today is the second part in our continuing series of our conversation with author and real-life, I would say, divorce survivor, Kiki Kennedy. The book is called The Checklist. In our first episode, we kind of talked about a lot of what just life was like.
Hold on, James. I have to cut you just for 1 second there because I just recently went to the doctor for my yearly physical, and it was interesting. He said, on your records, would you like me to put your status as single or divorced? And so for you to just say a divorce survivor, I didn't say those words to him, but I said, no, put divorce, because I'm very proud of that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And saying I'm single cuts out a part of my life that I very much still own, right?
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's a huge part. When I say divorce survivor, I think, what you survived is you don't just cut the cord and say it's done.
Right.
Right? You continue to still live with the fact you went through that, and you are divorced.
It never goes away, right? Yeah. So it's very much a part of who I am, and I'm proud of it. Interesting.
Well, where we kind of left off, I think, was talking through a lot of just who you were in your 20 years of marriage leading up to the process, how your family of origin kind of influenced your role as a mother, as a wife, what was expected of you, those type of things. And I'd like to kind of pick up from there and say, well, at some point, I think you'd mentioned in our last conversation, your husband, ex-husband, actually filed for divorce. So there was it got to the point where, obviously you are divorced, there was a formal filing that took place. If you picked it up from there or a little bit before there, I guess just because this is, I think, important for people to hear too, is just the reality, the weight, the impact of getting a piece of paper. We've had problems, we've been through counseling, all that stuff, but now he's actually taken this formal step. Do you recall kind of the weight that had upon you, the impact?
Interestingly enough, it really didn't have that much weight. I honestly thought it was just a tactic. I thought he was just calling my bluff.
And that he would just withdraw it once he got you in order?
Yes.
In thinking that, did you then think, I just have to do this and this, what I was told to do, and I'll be able to fix it by doing what's expected of me?
No, I had changed at that point, and that's why I was, I think, savvy enough to even think, oh, this may be a tactic. And the reason I say that is, well, let me backtrack just a tiny bit to give an all-encompassing view of the nutshell, right, of my existence, which was, I was my father's daughter for 20 years, dated my ex-husband, for 3 years, married him before I graduated college, and then was his wife for 20 years. There was never a me.
Interesting. Okay.
And I think that's very important because I think there are so many women who share that same aspect.
Where you don't feel like you have your own identity.
Yes, but I didn't know that at the time. I had no idea.
Interesting. So
I had no idea then.
Did that realization begin to take root at the time of the filing, when you started to have problems, or when did that
I didn't really realize that until we were separated.
Okay.
That's when things really started to become clear. But when he filed, the reason I felt he was calling my bluff is he had done a few things prior that those more blew my mind than the filing. And because here was this man who I had known for 23 years at the time. We dated 3 years. And I knew he was quite a tyrant, right? I knew he was a ball buster. I knew he was very successful in business. I knew people respected him. But I also knew that you didn't cross him. And I saw it all the time with people in the service industry, people who weren't his friends and he didn't want them to be his friends. He could be quite rude, aggressive, not nice.
Mm-hmm.
I never saw it with me until I did. And that's when we separated. Before he filed, he said, no need for attorneys. We'll just split half. And he was being very amicable. I'm like, oh, this is beautiful, right? All the while, he was going behind my back and consulting with all of the attorneys in our city.
So let me stop you there. Small town, big
Yes.
city?
Small.
So limited pool,
Yes.
probably of divorce lawyers.
Yes.
He goes around, has conversations with all of them ostensibly to disqualify them so that
Yes.
you cannot get the quality of interesting.
Exactly. And I had no idea. So all this time I'm thinking, okay, we're not going to use attorneys. But something in the back of my head said, maybe you shouldn't trust him, right? And there was a reason for that. But so I started looking.
Let me just jump in, because to me, for anyone out there, listen to what Kiki just said. There was something in my head. Some people say it's in my gut. Your instincts, you have to trust your instincts. Even if you've been in this relationship where you have this insecurity because of all of the years of gaslighting and being sort of beaten down, trust your instincts. Trust your instincts. And I tell people all the time, they say, oh, my husband said this, my wife said that. Why are you listening to them?
Right.
They're the ones divorcing you. Protect yourselves. And
Very
so,
true.
I mean, and even from the standpoint of my spouse says, we're going to do this amicably, great, perfect. You still should consult with an attorney. You should still retain an attorney. It may be that your attorney simply is there to dot I's, cross T's, here's the proper documentation, we prove up the case. Love that.
Right.
But you have to listen to what your instincts are telling you.
Exactly. And truly, now where I am today sitting here in this chair, that is the only thing I listen to anymore. I never listened to it once in our marriage. That is the only thing I listen to now.
Interesting. And throughout the marriage, all you did was listen to him.
All I did was listen to him.
Yeah. Wow.
So, but yeah, I had this funny feeling, and I was glad I did. And so I started to call around, and there was one attorney in our area who was very well known to be the best. And I called, and they took my name and number. He didn't call back. This went on for a good 2-3 months.
Calling the same attorney?
Yes, and I would laugh, and I'd say, it's Kiki, my daily phone call. Can he talk yet? And they kept putting me off and kept putting me off and kept putting me off. And then finally one day she said, wait a minute, which she knew all along.
Yeah.
She's like, wait a minute, are you Kiki of... And I said, yes. And she said, he can't see you. Mm-hmm. And the bomb that dropped, I didn't even see it until then I knew. Then I knew.
Yeah.
So I was left with the best of the worst, because and talk about humiliating. I had to call all these attorneys who I knew he had already called, but I had to do it anyway, just in case.
Yeah.
And I mean.
Let me pause there.
Mm-hmm.
And again, this is sort of one of these things, it's a takeaway. Let me throw the lawyer's perspective in this. If you're in a small town, if you are running into the situation that Kiki ran into, and again, hindsight's 20/20, but that's why we're doing conversations like this. Don't settle. I have people call me. I've tried cases in 9 counties around the state of Illinois. I've been involved in cases in other states where there's a procedure we can go into other states, because people have found similar situations. They've been conflicted out. They didn't feel confident with the level of the case as something that attorney in that community could handle. You're not limited to an attorney in your town. And you lived in Michigan.
In Ohio.
In Ohio, I'm sorry. So, if you say, okay, well, there's Columbus, there's Cincinnati, there's Cleveland. Well, I don't live in those towns, but could you find... So don't feel like you have to settle, because one of the most important aspects is making sure, just like a great counselor, you have to have a great attorney that's going to be able to fight if necessary, be able to conduct settlement discussions, discovery, get you all the information. So that's, to me, it's heartbreaking that that was your experience, because there are other ways, which at the time you just had no knowledge
I
of.
had no idea. And so I hired this woman, and there again, something was off. And it was so scary, because what did I know? I had never even really written a check for anything except like a babysitter, right?
Yeah.
My husband handled all the finances. Anytime there was something to do with the house or a property, he'd bring home papers and say, sign this. I knew nothing.
Yeah.
And so I didn't even know how to find an attorney or what to question or what to look for. All I knew was at a certain point when I was working with this attorney for, I think it was about 6 months, just something wasn't right. I can't tell you, but I just thought, I just don't feel like this woman has my back. So I actually had met someone in Chicago, an attorney, and of course she couldn't represent me being in Illinois, but she tipped me off on a database of attorneys in Ohio.
Okay.
So I consulted with a group in Columbus and a group in Cleveland.
Great.
And I ended up with the group in Cleveland. And karma's a funny thing, because had my ex not consulted me out of the circle in my hometown, I never would have ended up with the attorneys in Cleveland, and they were phenomenal.
Wow, great. Great.
So he kind of bit himself in the butt on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you go from we're kind of trying to work through things, counseling, weird messaging in the counseling. You're trying to figure out, am I to blame? Am I not? Trying to be a good mom. All this stuff's happening. At some point, you said you guys separate before a divorce was filed. Was that you physically separated?
Yes. So we had our home base, but we also had a lake house an hour away, very close. So when we separated, I didn't want to leave the house. I got kicked out of the house.
When you say got kicked out, through a court order, how did that happen?
My family. So my ex-husband, and when I say this is what I'm talking about, when you think you know your husband, you have no idea what they're capable of.
Yeah.
So, and because I had no idea of the narcissism and the ego and how reactive that personality can be. And again, I'd seen him do it to other people, never to me. He finally did it to me. And he turned my children against me. And it was a full-on front of just annihilation. All of them, my 4 children and my ex-husband.
To the point where, were they parroting things he would say?
Oh, it was as if he was speaking out of their mouths. I mean, they didn't know these words.
How old were the kids roughly around this time?
My youngest was 12, and my oldest, it was 3 days before he was leaving for his freshman year in college.
Wow. And so it's a combined attack, 4 kids, your husband saying, what, you got to get out of here?
Well, it wasn't even like my poor kids, they didn't have a choice. He basically brainwashed them. And imagine them not knowing what to do, right? So, yes, I mean, it was eventually a combined front. And I stayed in the house until at some point I decided, well, maybe I'll go live at the lake, right, for a little bit and see if things simmer down. It never crossed my mind that things wouldn't eventually simmer down. I mean, logic tells you, and it had always told me before, just give him a minute. He'll see clearly.
Yeah.
So I thought, I'll give him a minute. I'll just live at the lake. I'll come home. I'll see the kids. It never got better.
Yeah.
I'd come home. I'd ask to see the kids, and they'd lock the door. before I could get into the house. Or if I made it into the house, they'd go into the rooms and they'd lock their doors.
And he, I would imagine, wouldn't, if he tried to discipline, if he tried, he
not
wouldn't.
a thing.
Okay. Let me pause.
Sure.
Because this is it's a sad and critical piece. So the term of art is parental alienation.
Yes.
Okay. And some of you may have heard it, alienation, parental alienation. It is something that from the beginning of my career 31 years ago, I've heard the term, and I've never really understood it till I started to see it in cases. And what I have concluded, and this is just, again, it's a takeaway. If you find yourself in a situation, even remotely similar to Kiki, where you've had, and maybe I'm assuming something, did you otherwise have a positive, healthy interaction with the children?
Unbelievable relationships with my children.
Yeah. And again, this is sort of that textbook thing. The feelings you have, I've had people say, well, let's just give them space. I don't want them to get more upset with me, whatever. You can't do that. You have to act. You have to act quickly. You have to act aggressively. The court will order unification therapy. They will provide avenues for you to really disconnect them from that controlling, abusive behavior that they're getting, because they're getting a daily drumbeat. Your mom did this, your mom said that, your mom is this, she's the problem, whatever. And like you said, you've got these young, impressionable minds, even someone going off to college, 17, 18, 19 years old. You haven't figured everything out, and you trust your dad, right? You love your dad, and he's a powerful figure, and he's the one who's saying all this stuff, and you're not there. And I get people too say, I'm just not going to talk to my children. I don't want to be, accused of trying to, influence them or something. You got to fight. It's a fight for your life, because I've had cases where, and we'll talk about your situation, where years after the divorce is over, the wedding happens. One of the parents not invited. Grandkids are born, not part of their lives, not welcome. And you look at it and you say, that seems so illogical. Like, how could you, if you're a kid, 20 years you grew up, or 18 years, 12 years with your mom, she did all these things for you, and now I'm a 25-year-old. And you would think they would have that logical, rational ability to say, you know what, mom was always there for me, mom was always kind to me, mom took me everywhere, did all this stuff, cooked, all this stuff. Maybe mom wasn't entirely the problem. And as much as that seems logical, it doesn't always come back around.
And that's what I banked on. And I thought, I'm the one they come to. Yeah. I'm the one they come to with their emotions, their questions, he was more the drill sergeant. And I said, no, because I'm your father, right? Kind of stuff. Whereas I say, well, let's sit down and talk about it. And I would fight for things that they wanted to do that he didn't necessarily believe in. And like, you just kind of think, what? But the reason is he's the patriarch. And that wins. Yeah. And that really wins when they have the money, they have the house, they have the power. It just keeps snowballing. Yeah. And the more they rope the kids in, the more you lose them. I didn't realize it at the time. I did what I thought was best. I tried to stay in the home. That didn't work. There was, what did they call it? The guardian ad litem.
Yeah.
Put my children with a therapist who the therapist basically not incentivized, but she liked him. She didn't think that the kids should be with me. And it just blew my mind. I couldn't understand what did I do wrong? I didn't do anything wrong, right? And these are my children, and they've always come to me. His reign, his power, his dictatorship was that strong, I think, that they knew it too.
Was your husband prominent in the community?
Yes.
You mentioned a smaller town.
Yes.
So again, it's just, I mean, it's such interesting context for people to understand because, you know, you think about that and reputations, I know this person that knows that person that knows this person, you know, they tend to see things with the person they're aligned with.
Right.
And then, you know, you're going in thinking you're getting a fair shake with someone that should be approaching this in a neutral fashion. And I can tell you, I know this for a fact, you know, as a divorce lawyer, many of the people that do guardian work here, you know, there are those that have a great relationship and those that, you know, maybe not. Would I prefer to have a case with one of my clients with one of the guardians that I have a great relationship with? Yeah. Would they maybe see things or hear me differently because of my relationship? I mean, those real life things happen.
Well, and what was really tricky is two of my children were, well, one was over 18 and one was very close. And at that point, you have no control.
Right.
They're emancipated, right?
And then sometimes they're talking to their siblings.
And so, but that's exactly what happened. And so it's not just my ex-husband, it's all his friends, all their lives, and then those children.
Yeah.
And then it spreads to school. It spreads to the soccer field. It spreads to the tennis. It spreads everywhere. And without you even having done anything, you're all of a sudden the black sheep. And it's just been reiterated over and over and over again, literally through a gossip circle. But your kids hear it at every turn.
Yeah.
And so how do they not believe it, right?
Yeah.
And so when I saw that happening, I realized I had to move back into the house. I had to be a physical force to show them, I'm still your mom. I'm still everything I was all these years. They couldn't see it anymore.
Well,
and they would basically harass me in the house, and my ex wouldn't do anything about it.
The disrespect, saying things to you they never would have.
Never, ever would have said.
Yeah.
And he just stood there almost with a grin.
Laugh. Yeah.
Like, this is on you.
Yeah. Yeah. Very sad. Very sad. I will say this again, one of those things, folks, you can't leave. You cannot leave as hard as it is unless you have, which it sounds like maybe you didn't, a parenting order in place that the children are coming to the lake house.
We didn't.
Right? Because when you leave, it allows him to pile on another narrative. See, your mom was the one who caused the problems in the marriage. We had this great family. She's to blame. Now look at her walking out on us.
And that's exactly what he did. He said, she left. I didn't leave. I was literally kicked out.
Yeah.
And even when I tried to stay, it was just, there's only so much you can do.
Yeah.
But that is the truth. From the very first second, I should have, I think I was so afraid for my children to hate their dad because they already hated me. And I didn't want them to have no one. And I was just bent on not saying a bad word about their father while he's destroying me.
Yep.
But I didn't want their whole world to come crashing down about who their mother was and then for the same thing to happen with their father.
Yep.
And I really, really thought that he would come around. I thought he would just go, like, this isn't right.
Yeah. But he's incapable. He's incapable.
And that's when I started looking up the whole narcissism thing because it wasn't making sense.
Yeah.
And then when I started doing my research, I thought, this is so much bigger than I realized. And everything became very clear.
Yeah. And let me pick up on that too, because again, from the standpoint of, think about if you're in a situation, and again, people say he's a narcissist, she's a narcissist, you know, it is a, if you look at whatever we are, the DSM-6 or whatever, it is a diagnosable mental disorder. Mental health issues, very real. So you're thinking all these logical thoughts because you're a logical, rational person. You're sitting here saying, I don't want the children to be harmed in this process. You know, it didn't work out for us. And you would think, you logically think he would be thinking the same way.
Well, history had proven that. So anytime in our marriage that there was, we never fought. We really didn't. Mostly because I wouldn't let it go there. Yeah.
Yeah.
But in cases like when it came to the kids, at one point, my son wanted to take cosmetology in high school, and my husband had a very hard time with that. Felt that was just a more female-natured profession. So, and I fought for my son, right? And I talked my husband into it, to let him do it. And it was this wonderful experience, and my ex-husband ended up being glad that he did it. It was awesome. So history had showed me that I could always work it out, right? When it came to the kids. I wasn't going to do it for myself, but when it came to the kids, I fought for them. Yeah. And it always worked. I could always change his mind. So I thought, I can do this. Yeah. We met for coffee, and I tried, and that's when I really saw it. Yeah. I'm like, I can't change this. Yeah. And that's when I realized, I'm not sure if I can save this now.
But even think about your scenario. When you think about that, because this is what the point I'm getting to is, a narcissist has probably some general care for their kids.
For sure.
But it's secondary to them.
Yes.
And so in that instance you just raised, was it that he didn't want your son to learn cosmetology, for whatever the reason your son wanted to, or how that might? No, he was concerned about how that would reflect on him.
Exactly.
And so the minute you are in conflict with him, you are simply an opponent. There's nothing that is going to stand in his way, including your children's mental health.
Yes.
So you would logically think, well, he's not going to use our kids and pit our kids against me. I mean, we're going to raise them together and joint custody and all these things. But that's not within the psychological construct of someone like that. And you have to be aware of that. And that's something you're probably processing, like, I never even imagined he was this person, so how could you have prepared for that? But listen to the story, see the signs, and you've got to protect yourself in that. Because leaving, like I always tell people, you cannot leave. I want you to leave, but I want you to leave when there's a court order that says the kids are going to be with you half the time, or whatever the schedule is, because then you get to deprogram your kids.
Right.
They come over for their time with you, and it's your week, and they hate you, and they're saying all this disrespectful stuff, and then a day goes by, and 2 days go by, and all of a sudden, it's kind of getting back to normal, and they see mom as mom. And that's the conflict, because they're living with you. If you have that order where they're in your home, they're living a life that's inconsistent with what their father's saying to them. So at least you give them the opportunity in that space with you to have some independent thought. When they're under his control, you're gone. You have zero chance to balance that out.
But it was interesting, because in my case, for the short period of time that I was there before I left to live at the lake, he had already convinced them. So, and they were older. They have cars. They can drive. They can leave. Yeah. They don't have to stand there. They don't have to be driven by me. They go to school. They go work. They avoided me. And when I was in the house, if I did not confront them, but try to go talk to them, it was just full on horrific words coming out of their mouth. Yeah. And I think that's why at that point, I'm like, well, am I making this better or making this worse by staying here? Hindsight, yes, it's worse to leave, because then I have no chance of changing their minds. But it happened so quickly that he turned them. I still to this day cannot process how quickly. It was literally overnight.
So let me just bring in this anecdotal story. So I had a case where a young girl, I don't know that she was quite in her teen years yet. One child, mom and dad go through divorce. Same kind of story. Dad had turned the child against mom. The most disrespectful things a child would say to a parent, you'd never get away with. The dad's encouraging it, laughing, same stuff. I'm not seeing mom, don't want to have seen. We went in on a case, we were actually able to argue that to the court that they had to turn the child over and he needed help and had to get in. The guardian ad litem was very insightful in that case. And what seemed like, if you would have saw this, you would have said it's hopeless.
Right.
I mean, like you're saying, that they're already turned. And in a course, at first, it was very, very difficult. This girl was very resistant to being with her mother. And then some time went, and all of a sudden, things started to change to where the child, and this took years, the child began to understand some of the things through her own counseling, had a counselor for her, which is, again, very important. Get help for your children.
Yes.
So they can have somebody to express their thoughts, and hopefully is someone balanced, and, you don't always get that. But in this case, what was really interesting about it is the father was really not mentally well enough that the court said, you got to do this, you got to do that, and he just wouldn't. Mm-hmm. And so he literally wouldn't jump through the hoops and hurdles to get himself back into seeing. And so the daughter became very connected to mom. She went on, she did very well in school, and really became a successful young lady. But the reason I say that is because if you're in that situation like you were, mm-hmm. this process is going, I'm in the home, I feel like I'm the pariah even with my own children, I'm just going to leave because I need to give them their space and this isn't working. You got to find the right lawyer that's going to help you through that, mm-hmm. because I would never ever, not that I can allow you, if you were my client, I would say you're free to make your own decisions, but listen to me, please, trust me, please, I've been through this. This is a better path. Mm-hmm. And because I really believe that if there is a chance of you reconnecting and rebuilding that relationship, it's not too late. It doesn't just go 20 years or 15 years or 12 years and then stop in 6 months or 2 weeks or whatever it is. It can be serious, but if it goes unchecked, then it grows and mm-hmm. becomes worse. So in those moments, that's why I always fight for a parenting schedule. And all of you should understand, you can go to court. Your lawyer can go to court. Your lawyer can ask the judge, even if the divorce is going to be a 5-year divorce, the courts will set a parenting schedule. And whether it's 50-50 or it's every other weekend or whatever schedule the court sets or happens in your case, at least you have that time where he's not in their ear, right, or she's not in their ear. And you can just sit and we're at home watching a movie, having dinner. It's, even if the kids are pouting and they're not saying, and you're still a bad guy, they're still sitting here eating the meal and say, man, this was one of the favorite meals my mom always used to make for me. Mm-hmm. And so it's heartbreaking for me to hear this, especially, having 4 children. But it's so important. Even if you think you're doing the right thing, you got to stay in it and you got to fight, but you got to do it the right way with the right lawyer. Mm-hmm.
And I didn't have the right lawyer. And the other flip side of that too is I wasn't the woman then that I am now, and I was afraid, right? And here I've been listening to this man for 20 years. That in and of itself was scary to stand up to. Yeah. But yet I didn't want to hurt my kids, so I was so confused because I had never been truly a fish out of water ever before, like I was then.
Because you were always good at what you did. You were always confident, mm-hmm. and you felt powerless.
Completely powerless.
Yeah. To me, that's so real, and I haven't figured that out in my 31 years as to how to. You can't just say to somebody, "Be strong." Right. And I
didn't know how to be. Yeah. And so when you're so used to relying on the very person who is destroying you, that is just a psychological confusion that I can't explain. Yeah. And then on top of it, you're trying to do what's right for the kids. It's too much. And on top of that, you're taking advice from family and friends who have no idea what they're talking about.
Everyone's got an opinion.
Because they've never been through it.
Right.
Each case is unique, right?
Yeah. Yep.
But I think my overall writing, and this is the problem, I suppose, of having been married to a narcissist, and the history of me always being able to work things out. I never imagined he would do what he did. And so I think for just enough of a time to turn my kids against me, I think I was just in shock.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I'm trying to understand how this is even happening. Because my initial thought was, I'll fix this. This is nothing. Yeah. This is nothing. Let me just run home and fix this, and then I'll go to the grocery store and get stuff to make dinner. Like, this will be over in 10 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did not go that way at all.
Yeah. Can I ask you the evolution from there to what happened with the kids? Was there when the divorce was over, was there a parenting schedule where they?
No. So, like I said, the one was already 18. The one was very close. There wasn't anything I could do
so
there.
you were dealing ostensibly with your two youngest children.
Right.
Which by this time, how old, roughly?
So 12, when we first separated, was my youngest, which would put my oldest, or the one older than him, at 15, 16.
Okay.
Unfortunately, the attorney I had at the time, because of their ages, felt it was better to not force the children into a situation with me. And I bought that. To me, that made sense. And that they could live at the house, and I would see them. I worked where my daughter went to school, and I could see her there. But they weren't speaking to me, and when they were, it wasn't pretty.
Yeah.
So I also, and then I felt bad for my daughter because here, the home situation is horrible, and now at school, she doesn't even have relief because I'm there.
Yeah.
And the gossip circle is all talking, and that's the one, and that's her daughter, and it was just a nightmare. It was an absolute nightmare. And like I said, the attorney I'd had at the time talked me into that.
Wow. Wow.
And so, she said, they're old enough to decide, and you don't want to force them. It could make things worse. But like you said, which I hadn't considered, the more they're not with me, the more he's in their head.
Right.
And that's exactly.
Yeah. If somebody says that to you, this is driving me nuts. You have no connection with your children at the moment. They're talking disrespectfully to you. They won't do this. And somebody says to you, don't force something because you'll make it worse. How much worse could it possibly be?
Exactly.
That's
And there again, too young, not young, but too naive, too used to leaning on everybody else for everything, too unsure of myself to not trust that what she was saying was a good idea.
And every day that this is going by, he's there saying, look, where's your mom when you're struggling with this? Where's your mom?
Exactly.
She's not asking, and just, even if it's not true, the mantra, and it's daily.
And it's impossible, though, because you don't know. So, impossible situation, we took my oldest to college, right? I have a big, huge SUV.
Okay.
He has a tiny little four-door. We load up the SUV with luggage, and we had already arranged that we were going to have 2 hotel rooms. I would be in one, he would be in the other. And my oldest would be in the dorm, and then the younger 3 would split wherever they want to stay, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we load up the SUV with the luggage, and then as we all come out to get in the cars to go, and I say, well, who's coming with me? 2 in this car, 2 in that. And my ex-husband said, they're all coming with me. All 5 of them are going to load into the little 4-door.
Wow.
And I'm going to drive the luggage. And
wow.
I don't know what was I going to do, right?
Yeah.
And it was instance after instance of things like that. When we finally did get to the hotel rooms, he did the same thing. No one's staying in your room, they're staying with me.
Wow.
And it was constant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, to kind of put a bow on the struggles you had with the children through the process, all your children are out of high school? Are they out of college?
Yes. 2 out of college, 2 in.
Okay. And today, years later, after all of this has happened, how would you define your relationship with your children, if any?
So it's been 7 years. My daughter and I are closer than ever. And it's...
Did you have, 3 boys and a girl?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And my oldest is a boy. My older 2 are boys, then my daughter, and then my youngest is a boy.
Sure.
She eventually came around after about a year when we separated. Well, we separated for a year, and then I moved to Chicago. And she came around about a year after I moved to Chicago and wanted me back in her life. So I had to borrow a ton of money. We weren't divorced yet. I had to borrow a ton of money to get out of my lease here. My brother back home was going to let me live in one of his apartments for free. I got a job working back at my daughter's school again.
Okay.
And the plan was she was going to move in with me. It was her senior year in high school. So she was going to move in with me for her last year. So excited. 2 weeks after moving in with me, her dad took her car.
The financial control.
Threatened to take her phone, yeah. And when she sat down to talk about it, I said, I get it. Like, yep. I can't compete with that. Yeah. So you have to move back in with him. I said, but I'll see you at school every day, which I did. I made her lunch every day. We ate lunch every day. She came to my office. It was wonderful. And then, and I said, just come over anytime you want. Spend the night. We can watch movies, whatever. And he can be your home base. And all the while, not saying one mean thing about him, yet she picked it up, which this is crazy. He started to do to her what he had been doing to me, because he didn't have me to do it to anymore.
Consistent pattern.
And
yep.
he didn't like that she wanted me back in
yep.
her life.
Yep.
So he started,
yep.
There were ultimatums for her, and she caught it.
Yeah.
And she's like, you know what? Dad's starting to do to me what he did to you.
Yep.
And God love her. I mean, she stood up for herself.
Good for her.
She confronted him. They have a great relationship now.
Good.
So she has a great relationship with her dad and a great one with me.
Good.
I couldn't ask for anything better.
Wonderful.
He and I don't speak. He blocked me from his phone a long time ago. I've asked him a million times over the years. Therapy, like at least co-parent, at least be good parents together again. Right. He won't do it.
Right.
He thinks I'm a horrible person. So, and then my youngest 2, I haven't heard from. They came back a little, where they would agree to meet me for lunch, or they would answer a text, but that was about it. And then one day it just stopped, and I don't know why. So it's been almost 2 years since that stopped.
Do you try to reach out to them, send a Christmas card or a?
I did, and I constantly, even my family. So when he blocked me, my ex blocked my entire family. So my children lost their grandparents, their aunts and uncles, and their cousins.
Wow.
They lost my whole side. He cut us all off.
So the kids don't even have relationships
No.
with their cousins?
No. And my parents and my siblings all called him, said, you're still family, we still love you, nothing has to change. They invited him to Christmas for the next 5 years.
Wow.
Finally gave up. But I would still, at least maybe they'd come for Christmas, I would see him on Christmas, right? But at that point, you know, it's not a mother-son relationship anymore. It's barely a mother-nephew relationship. So, but at least it was something. At some point that stopped, and I'm not sure why. But when the book came out, my oldest drew the line in the sand and cut me off completely.
Because he felt that was shedding your family in a poor light, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Even though it's fiction, and obviously it's based on some experiences in my life, but it is fiction. Mm-hmm. I realized talking to him that it's a wound he just can't unwrap yet.
How do you live today? Very professional, successful, present very well. How do you hold that together?
Here's where you're going to get me. I guess because I refuse to be a victim. And I refuse to believe that this can't somehow work out someday. So patience is all I have.
Wow.
And it's morphed, sorry. It's evolved. So it kind of, and it's weird, you know, and there is no book for this. Nobody can tell you how to handle this, obviously. Otherwise I would have done it. But this really strange thing happens, and that's why it is so imperative that you just never walk out that door, not even for 5 minutes.
Yep.
Because the damage that they do in those first few days is irretrievable.
Yeah.
It's just done. It's unbelievable. So where I am now, my oldest came, this was probably about a year ago. He happened to be in Chicago, and I happened to text him as I did. Hey, thinking of you, love you, hope everything's great. What's going on in your life? And he happened to be in Chicago that day, just for that day, with his girlfriend.
Wow.
And he agreed to meet me for lunch. And so we met for an hour at Portillo's, and
Take your time.
I realized within 3 minutes of sitting down with him and talking to him that that wasn't my son. It was his father. And that was really hard to swallow. But at the same time, it was kind of a blessing, I suppose. Because this whole time, I didn't realize how much hope I was holding out in the best way. But what I was holding hope out on was my children from 7 years ago coming back. And they don't exist anymore. I don't know who those young men are. And that was really, obviously still, is hard to mourn because that's gone forever. Yes, I will always be their mother. Yes, we will always be connected, but I will never get that back.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and I explained that to him when he called, when he cut off ties completely. And I said, you don't know me anymore. I don't know you. But it doesn't mean that we aren't connected. That doesn't mean that we can't move forward. And that can work in one of two ways. We can move forward completely fresh, starting over as total strangers. Or we can go back and talk about all of it. Whatever you want to do. I just want to be back in your life. So I do believe that will happen someday. And it may take marriage, careers, babies. It may take that.
Sure.
I mean, certainly I won't be invited to his wedding. I know I won't.
Yeah.
So that was probably the hardest thing to get over. And it's funny because as it's happening in the beginning, first of all, because you can't have a concept of what's happening, how is this happening, and I will fix it and it will get better. That hope keeps you so positive.
Yeah.
And that hope keeps you from panicking. You should panic. And I didn't.
Yeah.
And it is so much harder now than it was then. Because now I know it's lost.
Yeah.
At least there was always hope.
Yeah.
I don't even have that because they're gone now.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you should panic. You should do everything you possibly can because it's almost like, it's like, you know, when you watch the shows on TV, like when a child goes missing, those first 48 hours are so crucial.
Yeah.
This is the same thing.
Absolutely.
Those first 48 hours are everything.
Yeah.
And that's where I went wrong.
Yeah. Kiki, let's take a little bit of a break. I think this is kind of a good time to conclude this segment.
Yeah.
And I just, for you, I have hope. And I hope that for you and your children, because this stuff, when you hear this, it's unimaginable.
It is.
People can't fathom this happening, but what you said is we have to drive home that point.
Yes.
If you find yourself in this situation, if you see this snowball starting to roll down the hill, you have to throw everything at it at that moment, because if it's a boulder and you're not going to be able to stop it.
You will never get it back, ever.
Yeah. So, again, very, very moving. I think this is so courageous on your part for people to hear this, to, have gone through this, to still have some hope, to have rebuilt your relationship with your daughter. Again, everybody, we are joined today by Kiki Kennedy, and the checklist is her book. And again, this is a fictional book, but again, you're understanding this is a book about divorce and the experiences that you've gone through. So we're so honored that you'll share those with us. I'd like to take a little break, and we'll come back. And I know there's a lot of financial issues in a divorce, and that's always a big part of it. There's financial abuse, and I'd like to get into a little bit with you to talk about that, if that's okay.
Perfect.
All right. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us, and we will return.